The crack didn't just echo, it vibrated through my skull. A sharp sting flared across my cheek, and for a split second my right ear popped like someone had flicked the inside of it. I tasted copper on my tongue. My son, Darren, had slapped me. In the foyer of the very house I'd built for him. Behind him, Mira stood near the staircase. She didn't speak. She tilted her head slightly, that assessing little tilt she used whenever she judged someone's worth. Her fingers tightened just a little on her crossed arms. When Darren glanced back at her, her expression softened, but the instant he turned away, it vanished. For a strange moment, everything seemed farther away. The floor, the walls, even my own voice. But inside that distance, a calm clarity rose like cold water. It hadn't always been like this. 5 years earlier, the idea that Darren would ever raise a hand to me seemed impossible. Back then, I'd just turned 60, my hands calloused from decades working construction along Gulf highways. Sun-beaten skin, old injuries, predictable routines. Up at 5, tools sorted by 6, lunch pail always packed the same way. People in Sagebrush County knew me as reliable. Nothing fancy, but steady, solid. When 17 acres outside Brighton Ridge, Texas went up for sale, I bought it outright. $192,500 cash, the sum of 42 years of split knuckles and overtime shifts. I wanted Darren to have a life I never could have dreamed of. He and Mira had lit up when I told them. They were newly married then, still gentle with each other. Darren was climbing in tech, Mira in corporate strategy. Glossy couple, glossy dreams. They talked about open floor plans and future babies. And since land prices near the city were impossible, I made the choice every father hopes to make. I gave them the land, and then helped build their home. We broke ground in spring. That summer, I remember something, a tiny red flag I ignored. Mira whispered something to Darren while I was measuring beams, and he rolled his eyes toward me. I pretended not to notice, but it sank deeper than I admitted. Still, we built. By fall, their cedar-sided house stood proud on the ridge. Mira chose imported fixtures. Darren wanted a custom workshop he barely used. They spent freely because I covered most of the bills. At first, the disrespect came in drops. At a neighborhood mixer, Darren corrected my pronunciation of Ethereum with a tight laugh. Guests chuckled. Mira flashed that polite smile, all teeth but no warmth. Another night, she joked about my coupon clipper mindset while holding a purse worth more than my first truck. But the real fracture happened slowly, and then all at once. One evening, during a gathering on their porch, Darren asked me to enter through the side gate. "You look like you've been working, Dad. We're trying to keep things presentable." Presentable. Like I was clutter. I walked back to my truck afterward. Sat in the dark. My hands gripped the steering wheel too tightly. The cab was silent, but that silence felt louder than a crowd. My old pickup hesitated before starting, or maybe that was just me hesitating. That was the moment something hairline cracked inside me. 2 weeks later, the phone call came. Darren's voice was rehearsed, brittle. "Dad, we need boundaries." Then Myra's voice slid in, smooth, practiced. "You're emotionally manipulative, Marshall. The things you say about our spending, it's toxic." Darren didn't meet her words with conviction, more with guilt, or confusion, or fear. His silence said more than her accusation. And me? My stomach dropped. I couldn't speak for a moment. When the call ended, I stood in my quiet kitchen staring at the walls I'd painted myself years ago. Then I reached into the drawer where I kept everything important. I spent an hour spreading receipts across the table. Tuition payments, wedding deposits, car repairs, lumber hauls, tile orders. Old paper smell mixing with the faint breeze from the ceiling fan, which kept blowing the corner of a Home Depot invoice upward like it wanted attention. My hand trembled once when I picked up the receipt for Darren's college housing, the one he'd thanked me for only at the time. It looked like a life's worth of giving. And suddenly, for the first time, it felt like a life's worth of being forgotten. A heavy weight pressed into my chest, betrayal in a physical form. The realization that I had been erased from a story I built with my own hands. The next morning, I called Leonard Briggs, my lawyer. "What are my rights?" I asked, "if I decide to sell the land?" He paused. A long, slow breath. "Marshall, you own it outright. If you choose to sell, no one can stop you." I didn't know it then, but the moment I asked that question, a storm had already begun forming. And the consequences would shake everything loose. Leonard Briggs's office always smelled faintly of old wood and lemon polish, the kind of scent that clings to places where serious, irreversible decisions are made. As he reviewed my land deed, I found myself tapping the edge of his desk with my thumb, not out of impatience, but to steady the grief tightening in my chest. "Marshall," he said finally, lifting the document like a verdict, "this is clean. One owner. You." His certainty should have felt like a safety net. Instead, the hum of his ceiling fan suddenly seemed too loud. Its slow, rhythmic were filling the silence where comfort should have been. "If you choose to sell," he continued quietly, "there's no legal barrier." "None at all." I nodded, though the truth felt heavier than the paper in his hands. Later that afternoon, Olivia Cantor from Golden Spur Realty met me on the ridge. She had a habit of rolling her pen between her fingers when she assessed something, not nervously, but analytically, like she was calculating value in her head. At one point, she knelt to pinch a bit of soil, rubbing it between her fingertips the way a jeweler tests a stone. "This land," she said, standing, "is going to draw developers fast, especially with the freeway extension coming." Fast. That was the word that stuck. She spoke numbers with the detached confidence of someone who had no emotional ties to the land. Where I saw memories, Darren running around with a hammer, the beam we measured twice, then cut wrong anyway. She saw square footage and ROI. Her price estimate nearly doubled my original cost. But again, it wasn't the money that struck me. It was how easily she spoke about a future where I no longer existed on this land. Meanwhile, Darren was unraveling faster than I expected. He called the next morning, voice strained. "Dad, did you meet with a realtor?" Mira thought she saw unfamiliar cars out near the fence line. The edge in his tone wasn't worry for me. It was fear of losing the life built on my generosity. "There are decisions I'm weighing," I said quietly. Silence. Heavy, pulsing silence. "Dad, why would you even think?" His breath hitched. "We're building our future here. We're building." As if I hadn't spent years building the foundation he stood on. Before he could finish, Myra's voice slid into the call. She didn't raise her voice. She never needed to. Her power came from tone, not volume. "Marshall," she said smoothly, "you're reacting emotionally. At your age, this kind of impulsive decision-making can worry people. You don't want the community questioning your stability, do you?" Her phrasing was too polished, too rehearsed, and Darren's silence behind her, the way he absorbed her words without protest, told me this wasn't the first time she'd framed me this way. "Mira, don't. Just let me talk." Darren tried to interject, voice quivering, but she placed a hand on his arm. I could hear the subtle shift of the phone, and he fell quiet. A marriage with cracks, but cracks she kept plastered with control. I ended the call gently, before I said something I'd regret. That afternoon, Olivia sent over the official listing contract. I sat at my small kitchen table, staring at the signature line. A breeze pushed through the window, rattling the blinds and rustling the papers. For a moment, I looked out at the patch of grass behind my rental. Nothing like the sweeping land on the ridge. My pen hovered, hesitated, then made contact. A single stroke, and the life I'd built started shifting in a new direction. The for sale sign was planted 3 days later. Bold, red, unmistakable. A declaration. A warning. Within an hour, Mrs. Harper called. "Marshall, dear, folks are talking. They're saying maybe Darren fell behind on payments. No one expected you to sell that place." Community eyes were already widening. Whispers already running. Then Darren called. "Dad, why is there a sign in our yard?" His breathing was ragged. "Just tell me you're not really doing this." 20 minutes later, he burst into my rental like a man running from a burning building. His eyes darted around my humble living room, the contrast to his spacious home hitting him like a slap of reality. "Dad, please," he said, voice cracking. "We should have talked. You can't just." His panic wasn't about losing family. It was about losing security. Mira stepped in behind him, posture stiff, jaw clenched. But when she saw the listing packet on my table, her expression fractured, not fear, but calculation. She was realizing her leverage wasn't just slipping, it was vanishing. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. "Olivia. Marshall, the developer wants a tour tomorrow morning. They're extremely interested." The room froze. Darren went pale. Myra's fingers twitched, a rare crack in her armor. And in the quiet heartbeat that followed, I knew the fuse had fully caught flame. By dawn, Brighton Ridge felt different, like the air itself carried whispers. When I drove past Darren and Myra's house, I noticed something small but telling. The porch light, once always left on for me, was off. A darkened welcome, a quiet metaphor for where we now stood. The "for sale" sign hadn't even settled into the soil before the neighborhood started slowing their cars, lingering their glances, stitching stories together. But the shift became undeniable when the developers arrived. 2 trucks and a crisp-suited man stepped out just after sunrise. Grady Lorne, from Pinnacle Crest Development, surveyed the land with the calculated hunger of someone appraising an opportunity, not a legacy. As he walked the ridge, Mira appeared at the doorway. She smoothed the front of her blouse, not for him, but to steady herself. Darren moved slightly in front of her, a subconscious protective stance, though he didn't seem sure what danger he was shielding her from. Grady examined the cedar fence, the soil, the gradient of the land. "This is prime," he said. Timing couldn't be better. The moment he said redevelopment, Myra's jaw tightened. Darren swallowed hard, eyes flickering between Grady's professional certainty and the house behind him. A house suddenly looking temporary, fragile. I noticed something else. The workshop door, once always open when Darren was home, was closed and locked. Grady's crew photographed everything, including that workshop. I saw Darren's face fall when the camera clicked. It wasn't anger this time. It was recognition, a dawning understanding that the life he took for granted was no longer guaranteed. The developer interest came fast, too fast for Darren to grasp, too fast for Mira to control. And that speed, it terrified them. By afternoon, Mira made her move. She posted a carefully cropped photo, only a sliver of the house visible, mostly sky, and her hand resting protectively near her stomach. She knew exactly what she was doing. Show vulnerability, hide context. Her caption hit like a loaded weapon. "Please keep us in your prayers. We're facing betrayal from someone we trusted. Trying to stay strong while dealing with elder instability and housing insecurity." No name, no specifics, just enough truth to sound valid. Enough omission to damn me. Within minutes, comments poured in. "Stay strong, sweetie. You don't deserve this. Some parents don't change." Darren posted next. Heartbroken, but trying to move forward. No wonder this spread. They were crafting a narrative designed to trigger sympathy and outrage. And they succeeded. My phone buzzed endlessly. Neighbors, old coworkers, even my mailman. People asking if I'd really turned on my own child. But before I could respond, something inside me shifted. Not anger, not bitterness. A resolve. I opened the wooden box where I kept receipts from the last 2 decades. For a moment, before touching anything, a memory flashed. Darren at 10 years old, helping me unload lumber, smiling like the world was made of possibility. That smile felt far away now. I lifted the lid. Inside were stacks of receipts: education, rent, groceries, truck repairs, lumber, tile, fixtures. A life's worth of invisible sacrifice. One envelope caught my eye, a note I'd written on the corner years ago. "For Darren, proud of you." The ink was slightly smudged. It had gotten wet the day we installed his porch roof during a surprise summer storm. I placed that receipt gently on top of the pile, feeling something crack inside. When I spread everything across my kitchen table, the papers fluttered from the breeze through the window, as if trying to speak after years of silence. These weren't just numbers. They were proof of love. The neighborhood forum erupted next. A realtor friend messaged, "Marshall, is everything okay? People are saying Darren fell behind on something." Someone else commented publicly, "Didn't Marshall build that house for them?" Myra's narrative was losing oxygen, and she felt it. I could sense the shift. So I posted a statement of my own, not emotional, not heated. "For clarity, I purchased the land myself. I funded most construction. Darren and Mira have lived here rent-free. I am selling my property. Legally, that is my right." I added. I chose every word carefully, then attached the deed and 3 receipts. The tide turned instantly. People began questioning Mira. Screenshots of her designer bags resurfaced. Private messages pinged with apologies. Truth doesn't shout. It waits. And then it lands. That evening, Darren appeared again. His hair was disheveled, shirt buttoned unevenly, keys clutched too tightly in his hand. Stress had carved itself into him. He glanced back at the car where Mira sat rigid, arms folded like a barricade. "Dad," he whispered, Am I allowed to come in?" His hand trembled on the doorframe. "Of course," I said. "Come in, son." He stepped inside slowly, each step a confession of a choice he was afraid to make. And watching him, I knew. Tomorrow's offer wouldn't just change the land. It would force everyone to take a side. A reckoning was coming. None of them were ready. The developer's offer arrived the next morning. Not quietly, not subtly, but with the kind of presence that felt intentional. The envelope was thick enough to bend the mailbox flap, a glossy white that gleamed too brightly in the Texas sun. When I picked it up, there was weight to it. Literal weight. As if everyone's future had been packed inside. The new ink smell hit my nose before I even stepped inside my rental. Just as I closed the door behind me, the wind shifted across the ridge, carrying faint voices from Darren and Myra's porch. Their home sat far enough to require a raised voice to hear. And yet, I caught every strained syllable the breeze was willing to deliver. Myra's voice cut through the morning air, sharp and metallic. "You should have stopped him before it got to this point." Then Darren's, pacing steps pounding the boards so hard I heard them creak, his voice cracking under pressure. "How? He won't listen. He's selling the land out from under us, Mira." A door slammed. The sound echoed across the ridge like a warning shot. I looked down at the envelope in my hand. It seemed heavier now. By midday, the entire street felt altered. People still drove by, but fewer hands waved. A couple walking their dog crossed to the opposite side of the road when they saw me outside. Even Mrs. Harper, who never missed a chance to chat, offered only a tight, polite nod before hurrying indoors. A realtor friend texted, "Marshall, people are saying Darren missed mortgage payments. You okay?" Another neighbor messaged Darren privately. He screenshot it and sent it to me. "We're here for you. Don't let him bully you." The community wasn't reacting anymore. It was splitting, and Mira was pushing the blade deeper. She posted again. This time, the photo was chilling in its calculated simplicity. A half-open suitcase on the floor, a soft light falling over it, and, barely visible in the blurred background, a framed ultrasound photo. Except she wasn't pregnant. Anyone who didn't know that would assume otherwise. Her caption, "Trying to protect my home during the hardest chapter of my life. Some betrayals cut deeper than family. Hashtag family crisis, hashtag protecting what matters." She disabled comments from certain accounts. I wasn't surprised to find myself among them. Within minutes, sympathy flooded in. "You're so brave. This is heartbreaking. He should be ashamed." But then small cracks formed. A neighbor asked, "Didn't Marshall build that place?" Someone else replied, "Isn't the land in his name?" A third posted my earlier receipts. The tide wasn't turning yet, but it was shifting. I set the envelope on my kitchen table. It landed with a dull thud, not a soft pat, a sound that made my stomach tighten. Inside, the offer gleamed with developer confidence. Higher than predicted, almost aggressively generous. Pinnacle Crest wasn't merely interested. They wanted the land now, and they didn't care what needed to be demolished to get it. A shiver moved across the ridge as the wind rattled the loose porch boards. Boards Darren and I had once sanded together on a hot July afternoon. He came over late in the afternoon. He didn't knock. He just stood in the doorway, slightly out of breath, keys still dangling from the ignition of his truck. He kept glancing at his phone even though it stayed dark, a man waiting for instructions from someone who wasn't present. His wedding ring spun nervously on his finger. "Dad?" he said, voice unsteady. "The developer met with us." I nodded, waiting. "They said they might tear the house down." The word tears scraped out of him like it hurt to say. "They will," I said softly. "They're not buying your home, Darren. Just the dirt under it." He swallowed hard. His hands trembled. Then he whispered, "I don't know what to do." For a second, just a second, I hesitated before inviting him in. Not out of anger. Out of instinct. Hurt teaches caution. But I stepped aside. "Come in, son." He walked in slowly, eyes darting around as if the small rental was an unfamiliar country. He sat at my kitchen table, the same table that had been covered in receipts, and pressed his palms against his forehead. "She wants to fight it," he muttered. "Of course she does," I said gently. He didn't argue. A scent of jasmine drifted in before she did. The door creaked open without a knock. Mira stepped inside, heels clicking sharply. Her eyes darted between Darren's hunched posture and my calm presence. Calculating, recalculating. "Darren," she said, voice edged with steel, "we need to go." He didn't move. She stepped closer. Her fingers gripped his arm, just a fraction too tight. Now, her mask flickered. Anger, fear, something darker, but she restored it quickly. As they left, Darren paused at the threshold. He looked at me, eyes glassy, voice barely audible. "Dad, I'm sorry." A gust of wind swept across the ridge, lifting dust, shaking the new survey stake the developer had planted earlier. It quivered in the dirt like a warning flag. And I understood. The balance of power had shifted, and Mira knew the ground beneath her was starting to crack. The next morning, as I drove past Darren and Myra's house, I caught a tiny movement. Fast, deliberate. The blinds snapped shut. Not a slow, absent-minded tug. Someone yanked them closed, slat by slat, until the house looked shuttered, sealed, unwelcoming. Just before the last slat fell into place, I saw a silhouette in the window, a head turning away in a frantic blur, as if caught doing something shameful. The home I built with my hands now hid from me like a guilty child. Truth will do that. It creates shadows, and people rush to hide in them. Sagebrush County had never been a quiet place, but that morning the silence felt choreographed. On Maple Bend Road, a man turned off his sprinkler mid-arc as I approached, water sputtering to an awkward stop. A jogger slowed, pulled out one earbud, listening. A woman walking her dog pulled the leash short, as if I carried danger. People weren't just aware. They were watching. By the time I reached the general store, it felt like every porch in the neighborhood had new eyes. Inside, Eli rang up my items with quiet hands. He hesitated before speaking. "My uncle works with Pinnacle Crest," he whispered. "He says you didn't do anything wrong. He says it's your land." The words hit harder than he knew. A kid barely old enough to vote understood the situation, more clearly than my own son. I nodded. "Thank you." Eli looked embarrassed, like telling the truth might get him in trouble. By midday, Myra's curated narrative was unraveling. Her latest post showed the half-open suitcase again, but this time, she had added a detail. A blurred ultrasound frame in the corner of the image. Intentionally vague. Strategically placed. Anyone glancing would assume pregnancy. Anyone who didn't know the truth would feel instant sympathy. She'd even liked her own comments. And the post showed edited underneath, a sign she'd fine-tuned her tragedy for maximum impact. When people began questioning the story, she disabled comments. The moment the feature activated, it felt like a door slamming shut. Mira wasn't defending herself. She was defending a narrative. That evening, the GoFundMe appeared. "Help us save our home from cruelty." A strangely precise fundraising goal. $47,800. Not round, not random. Calculated. The page used a 3-year-old photo of Darren looking exhausted after a long shift. Out of context, repurposed for sympathy. The description was written in the third person. "This young couple has been targeted by an unstable elder acting out of anger. Not my father-in-law. Not Marshall. An unstable elder." It started receiving donations immediately. Then the forum lit up. Someone posted, "Why does the photo look old?" Another, "Wasn't the house a gift?" A third, "If she's pregnant, why is no one congratulating them?" Mira responded by sharing the fundraiser on every platform she had. But the cracks were getting harder to conceal. Around 11:45 p.m., a soft knock rattled my door. I opened it to find Mrs. Carter, who lived 2 houses down from Darren, wrapped tightly in a shawl, looking over her shoulder every few seconds. "Please don't tell anyone I'm here," she whispered. Her voice shook, not from cold, from fear. I ushered her in. Across the street, a porch light flicked on, then off, as if someone was checking who had moved in the dark. Mrs. Carter lowered her voice when she said Myra's name, as though speaking it too loudly might summon her. "I overheard her on the phone," she whispered. She said, "I'll turn the neighborhood against him before the offer goes through." My jaw tensed, and she said something else. Mrs. Carter swallowed. "Darren will fall in line. He always does." She placed a folded flyer on my table, one of Myra's GoFundMe handouts. As she left, I noticed flyers littered across the sidewalk, one pinned under a windshield wiper, one torn and blowing across my driveway like a discarded accusation. Mira wasn't just spreading her message. She was infestation. The next morning, before sunrise, Darren texted, "Can we talk?" Alone. No Mira. No performance. Just him. He arrived pale, unshaven, wearing the same clothes as yesterday. His wedding ring spun on his finger, a nervous tick he didn't seem aware of. He walked inside and immediately bumped into a chair, muttering an apology to furniture. I can't. I can't keep up with her posts, he said, pacing. His voice cracked on the word home when he said, she says it's the only way to save our home. Then his phone buzzed. He froze. His eyes flicked toward it, then away. The look of someone afraid of the person on the other end. He didn't pick it up. He sank into a chair, defeated. Dad, I think I made everything worse. And for the first time, I believed he finally saw the truth, not about me, but about her. Outside the window, a low rumble echoed over the ridge. Storm clouds gathered, heavy and dark. A distant crack of thunder rolled across the land. Fractures had formed everywhere. In the neighborhood, in the marriage, in the story they had built. And fractures, under pressure, always widen. The storm that had threatened for days finally let go just after dawn, but it didn't feel like weather. It felt like a verdict. Rain hammered Brighton Ridge in slanted sheets. A gutter along my rental roof ripped loose with a metallic howl and slammed against the siding 2 houses down. A broken branch swung violently and struck the side of Mira and Darren's porch with a sharp crack. Mud slid over old footprints on their drive, erasing the tracks I used to follow when I came to help. Everything wet and slippery, the ridge seemed to give way under itself. When I drove by, a small tableau told me everything I needed to know. The porch light that had been left on one night last week was still flickering, forgetting it was supposed to be a welcome. A child's plastic truck, the one I'd once oiled for a neighbor's kid, lay overturned in the yard, half buried in soggy leaves. The mailbox at the road had been blown open. Envelopes and flyers fanned out like fallen birds. One of Myra's GoFundMe leaflets was plastered against the garage, the ink bleeding into unreadable streaks. Darren stood on the porch, motionless, rain flattening his hair. He didn't see me at first. When he did, relief and dread collided on his face. He tried to smile, and it didn't take. Mira stepped out behind him, phone already in hand. She raised it like a shield, a small, deliberate lift, and narrowed her eyes as if measuring which angle made her look most wounded. When she angled the phone up, I watched the way she adjusted the frame, silent and precise. This was no accidental footage. It was a broadcast being composed. I kept driving. The weather felt like an external pulse matching the tension inside their house. By noon, the neighborhood had become a makeshift tribunal. I overheard 2 men near a pickup in the grocery lot. Someone said she's pregnant. Poor kid, one muttered. Yeah, but I heard Marshall practically paid for half the block's repairs last year, the other replied. Hard to square. At the store, Eli lowered his voice as he bagged my groceries. People keep saying things, Mr. Marshall. I don't get how strangers believe a post more than a man's history. His eyes flicked away. The sentence landed like a small blade. Strangers believed Mira more readily than my own son. Then Grady called. Marshall, he said, smooth as ever. We'd like to schedule preliminary demolition evaluations next week. Early prep, nothing structural yet. The word demolition landed like lightning. Even across the ridge, something reacted. A neighbor shouted in the distance. A screen door slammed. Curtains twitched as if someone was listening for the future to arrive. I agreed. Saying yes felt like admitting the inevitable. Later, I found Darren pacing their driveway. He was a different kind of beaten, not only by words, but by the weight of choices. His hands shook so badly he dropped his phone. It skittered across wet concrete and stopped at my shoe. He bent to pick it up, fingers fumbling, then let it lie. Dad, he said, voice raw. She's talking about calling a lawyer. She says we can sue for emotional harm. His voice cracked on harm, and the word home later when he said, she says they'll take everything if we don't act. I watched him rub his ring in a nervous loop, the band spinning like it could loosen the knot inside him. Then Mira did what she'd been priming for. She tapped the phone screen, a practiced, sharp tap, and angled the camera higher so Darren's face and my reaction fit within frame. She stepped just far enough into the shot that he looked isolated. Before speaking, she leaned in as if to whisper, then raised her voice for the camera. Marshall, she said with syrupy civility. We were just discussing options. This is documentation. She smiled, but the smile was a blade. The whole scene was weaponized. The camera, the angle, the soft lighting. She wanted footage, a clip without context, a moment that could be re-uploaded, re-looped, and used as evidence of aggression. She wanted spectacle. I nearly said as much, that it was performance, but the point wasn't to be right then. It was to avoid giving her the material. She named me trespasser anyway. Her little accusation landed like a recorded cue. I read it for what it was, bait designed to be clipped. She wanted me to argue. She wanted the 10-second soundbite that made me the monster. I turned and left because any protest would have been the exact thing she wanted on camera. Darren stayed, arms folding around himself like a man bracing against an unseen wind. That evening, my phone buzzed. A text came from an unknown number. "Keep pushing this sale, and you'll regret it." I stared at it. The reply field sat open, awaiting something I had no words for. Then the message disappeared, the thread vanishing like someone had snatched the paper out of my hand. A second notification popped up. A typing bubble appeared for a beat, then vanished. No name, no trace. Seconds later, another note arrived. "You're destroying lives." They were watching, or someone was. The messages read like a threat, but the delivery felt surgical, anonymous, ephemeral, like something manufactured to intimidate without an origin. As twilight fell, a porch light across the street flickered on, then off, then on again. The old swing on Darren's porch shifted 1 inch, then stopped. The ridge held its breath. I sat on my front steps and watched the darkness close in, feeling how close everything was to snapping. Fractures were everywhere now. In the neighborhood, in a marriage, in a son who looked for his feet and found only mud. And the storm had taught me that once something begins to collapse, it does not need wind to finish the job. It just needs time. The morning after the anonymous threats, the ridge felt wrong. A new crack in the walkway stretched from my doorstep toward the drive. Not clean or accidental, but jagged, uneven, almost violent. Moisture pooled inside it, catching the pale sky like a thin silver blade. It looked less like damage and more like something had forced its way up from beneath, breaking free. When I looked toward Darren and Myra's house, a strange stillness settled over me. The porch swing, which last night had rocked softly in the storm winds, now hung perfectly still, unnaturally so. One chain swayed just a hair, though there was no wind. And on the armrest, Dew outlined the faint impression of a hand. Someone had been sitting there, watching. By mid-morning, the Ridge's online forum resembled a courtroom mid-riot. A moderator had pinned a warning at the top. "Keep discussion civil or comments will be removed." No one listened. Someone posted a cropped screenshot of Myra's GoFundMe, saying, "This looks like emotional fraud. Should we report it?" Another claimed to have screenshots of messages Myra deleted. Then came the comment that detonated everything. "Is she actually pregnant? Because that ultrasound frame looks downloaded." A chain of shocked emojis followed. Some defended her viciously. Others demanded answers. Neighbors who'd never spoken to each other were now sending paragraphs back and forth like legal briefs. It was no longer conversation, it was warfare, and the entire ridge felt the tremors. When I stepped outside to collect the mail, a cluster of neighbors stood near the cul-de-sac. No pretense now. They weren't pretending to water plants or sweep driveways. They were gathered, debating openly. I heard the fragments. If she lied about the pregnancy. Marshall built that workshop. She called him unstable. Can we verify that? He fixed my roof. I owe him respect. But what if he did promise them the house? In the middle of their argument, I saw Darren, leaning against my fence, head bowed, rain-damp hair plastered to his forehead. He looked like a man erased. His shoulders trembled slightly, whether from cold or guilt, I couldn't tell. I approached slowly. "Dad," he whispered, voice hoarse. "I need to tell you something." He squeezed his temples, then covered his mouth, swallowing a sob he didn't let out. "I didn't know about the ultrasound photo. It's not ours. She found it online. Said it would strengthen the narrative." He tugged at his wedding ring unconsciously, twisting it, pulling it, like he wanted to peel the past off his finger. He looked up at me, eyes red. "She keeps saying you're dangerous. She says she needs proof. She told her sister she's going to provoke you on camera." His voice cracked when he added, "I don't know who I am in that house anymore." The words shook out of him, finally free after months of pressure. But the moment wasn't done breaking. A car door slammed. Hard. The kind of slam meant to announce a presence before the person arrives. Myra's shadow stretched across the pavement before she did. Long, sharp, and unmistakable. Then she appeared. Hair perfect. Makeup perfect. Breath uneven. Eyes wild. Her phone was already recording, held low at her side, a covert angle designed to make the footage look raw and urgent. When she stepped closer, her smile flickered half a second too late, like her face was remembering choreography it hadn't rehearsed. "Darren," she snapped, "what are you doing over here?" He straightened instinctively, the reflex of a man conditioned to anticipate her reaction. "We're talking," he said quietly. "No," she said, voice turning serrated. "You're letting him manipulate you." She pointed the phone directly at my face, not his. A deliberate crop. A weaponized frame. She knew exactly which version of the truth she wanted to capture. "Mira," I said evenly, "put the phone down." Her lashes lowered, her smile stretched, and she stepped close enough that her perfume hit my throat like sweetness masking venom. Under her breath, low enough only Darren and I could hear, she whispered, "Give me something to work with." Darren recoiled. The expression on his face, horror, recognition, betrayal, was the clearest he'd worn in years. Then Mira snapped her head back, lifted her chin, and performed. "Stop threatening me," she shouted, voice breaking on cue. Gasps erupted. Several neighbors stepped forward. Phones rose, recording reflexively. A collective inhale tightened the air. I hadn't moved. Not a step. Not an inch. But her lie moved enough for both of us. In the silence that followed, something in Darren cracked open. He looked at Mira, truly looked, and the reality hit him with such force that his hand slipped off his ring. "I can't do this anymore," he whispered. A sentence years in the making. A surrender and a truth all at once. The ridge went still, utterly still. Even the wind paused. Mira froze, mask fracturing in real time. Behind her, a loose survey stake, the one the storm had loosened, finally fell sideways into the mud with a soft thunk. And that sound felt like the ridge itself acknowledging the shift. There was no going back. Not for Darren. Not for Mira. Not for any of us. The ridge woke in a different way the morning after Darren's admission. Not the taut, watchful quiet of weeks past, but something like an exhausted hush. The fog sat low, hugging the ground like insulation over a wound. Even sound felt muffled, as if the ridge itself were trying to protect the raw places from further scarring. Survey stakes leaned at odd angles where the ground had given. Where the creek once chuckled, leaves drifted in the fog like pale flags. A piece of torn survey tape from the developer fluttered in the low grass, catching the light now and then as if undecided about staying or going. By mid-morning, the neighborhood forum's momentum had turned into a kind of public unmasking. Someone uploaded a slowed-down clip of Myra's outburst from the day before. Played in halftime, the performance read wrong. Her smile arrived late. Her eyes darted briefly to the phone right before she raised her voice. Comments stacked rapidly. She staged it. Watch the eyes. How do people not see the editing? Deleted comment. Comment removed by author. A small note that spoke louder than any defense. One neighbor, Linda Hammond, posted a line that landed with unexpected weight. "He helped clear my driveway in 2 storms. I can't square that with what she's selling." Other replies sparked like dry tinder. Some people posted screen grabs of Myra's fundraiser and the ultrasound. One commenter noted the image's source URL. The moment the community smelled manipulation, control crumbled. By noon, the forum had split into clusters of argument and astonishment. A moderator pinned a final warning, civility only. But the damage was done. The illusion had been stripped away in public. There was a quiet knock at my door shortly after noon. When I opened it, Darren stood at the threshold, no ring on his finger, face hollow in a way that only comes from nights spent crying quietly rather than in public scenes. His eyes were swollen, rimmed with red, the aftermath of private grief. He stepped inside slowly and sank into the chair we'd used for so many conversations. His hands trembled as they folded in his lap. "I left," he said simply. It was both confession and relief. He spoke of the ultrasound with a bitter clarity. "It wasn't ours," he said, and paused as if tasting every syllable. "She found it online in a parenting forum and said it would strengthen the narrative." My breath caught in my chest, not from shock so much as sorrow, the kind that settles when truth arrives late and heavy. I remembered the many small things that built a life. The receipts, the nights on scaffolds, the Saturdays hauling gravel with a younger pair of hands. Those memories felt both vindicated and mournful at once. Darren rubbed his thumb along the place his wedding band used to sit, an unconscious search for the shape of a life he'd expected to wear. She told her sister she would provoke you to get something on camera, he whispered. I didn't know she meant that seriously. He looked up at me then, and for the first time in months his face was not a mask of confusion, but a person finally unclogging. I can't do this anymore, he said. The sentence was quiet, but there was a hollow clarity to it. Not defeat, something closer to freedom. We stepped outside together later that afternoon. People had gathered subtly, neighbors drawn by the same gravity that had pulled at the forum. Phones rose in unison like a flock of small, impartial witnesses. A single, collective inhale tightened the air. Even the neighbor's dog barked once and then went silent, as if sensing the moment's gravity. Mira arrived like a storm of purpose, heels clicking sharp on the sidewalk, the sound puncturing the subdued crowd. Her expression adjusted the instant she saw the neighbors, a practiced shift from righteous anger to victim to martyr, all on a loop. Her phone was already recording. She angled it with the same care she'd shown before, cropping and choosing what would be fed into the narrative machine. She stepped close enough that her breath brushed our faces, and, in a voice meant only for Darren and me, she hissed, "Give me something to work with." The whisper was small and intimate and poisonous. It landed like a private threat disguised as a demand. Then, for the cameras and the crowd, she performed, a tear, a plea, a choke of outrage. For a beat, people seemed ready to side with her. Then a neighbor stepped forward and replayed the slowed clip on his phone. The half-speed reveal, the editing, the late smile, hit the crowd like cold water. Murmurs started, then questions, then the sound of phones tapping keyboards, screenshots, checks of image sources, cross-references. Myra's mask crumpled in real time. She left at dusk. Her SUV bounced down the hill too fast, the driver's nerve evident in the way the rear jabbed over the road's dip. The car's taillights smeared into the fog and then were gone. Not a single hand waved. The ridge turned away, an almost audible relief moving through the rows of porches. Darren stayed that night. We sat on the porch and watched the fog lift as the first single warm beam of sun cut through the gray, striking a small piece of torn survey tape and lifting it slowly into the air. It fluttered and then drifted, untethered. Home was never just up there, he said softly. It was wherever somebody left the door open. I squeezed his shoulder. Then let's build someplace better, I said. The survey tape twirled out of sight. The fog thinned like a curtain being drawn. The ridge, bruised but still standing, seemed ready to begin again. Not everything was repaired. Not every wound closed. But as sun broke through the clouds in a single warm beam, what remained was honest. And for now, that was more than enough.